and I'm the voice of extreme caution. But as soon as producers start talking about they're going to sell milk to the public, the very first thing you hear them say is all the regulation, all the things you got to do to meet government regulations to sell it. It's all just ridiculous. I drink my milk every day and I never get sick. And you know what, folks? There's a good reason for that. It's your environment. It's your bacteria. You are used to it. Another thing is, as farmers, we're healthy. You can't do the amount of work a farmer does and have a health issue. And therefore, because we're healthy, because we're in a bacteria-laden environment, we have good immune systems. We keep them, giving them a good workout. And my experience is, people that are willing to pay $8 and $10 a gallon for milk, they've got some compelling reason that has them out there wanting the product. They've got some kind of health issue. It could be something as small as lactose intolerance. You know, you have things like babies that can't take the formula. You've got ulcers, diverticulitis, Crohn's disease. Our biggest customer, we had a dairy in Pennsylvania for 10 years, and our biggest customer were end-of-life people with cancer. So, you know, when people have these kinds of issues, you know, stuff that doesn't bother you can hospitalize them. So you have to think about the kind of person that you're selling it to and what their needs are. So we have to go the extra mile to be careful with bacteria. You know, bacteria is everywhere. It's in your environment.
It's in the air.
It's in the air. You know, if you think about where your bacteria comes from, you've got direct contact. You got dirt on your equipment, on the belly of your cow, your goat. You've got, it gets in the air. Particles are microscopic, and you know, a goat poops and it hits the ground, and just envision the reaction of it spraying up into the air, and you know, there's microscopic bacteria everywhere. And you milk into an open bucket like this, it takes you 5 or 8 minutes to milk. You're milking in that, you've got that whole surface area available to absorb that bacteria. The other thing is your water. The water that you clean your equipment with. What kind of bacteria is in your water? So my job here is to talk to you about all the places the bacteria comes from and how you can minimize it so that when you sell it to folks that have health issues, that you're not going to make them sick. The water is an easy fix. If you've got water, you know, we have spring water. We've always had spring water, and there's just no way that water is clean enough. Spring water is clean enough for you to wash your stuff in. You can take a sample of your water down to the health department, and I don't remember what it cost when we put our spring in. It's either free or a couple bucks. Take a sample of your water down and drop it off, and they'll test it and tell you what your coliform count is. If you've got coliform count higher than, you know, 12 or 15 in a field on the microscope, you probably want to consider doing something to clean your water. What we have is an ultraviolet light system. It's a pipe about yo long, and you put it in your water line, and when your water runs through, the ultraviolet light zaps the water as it comes through, kills all the bacteria, and then you've got pure water coming in to where you feed your animals, where you wash your stuff. As far as, you don't want to milk your animals in where they live. Much as you know, I drink milk from my living area, but again, like I was saying, that's my bacteria, I'm used to it. You really need to have a separate place where the animals don't live. And because of that, if you think about the goats, they're milling around. Every time they walk through the bedding, they're stirring up dust particles. And, you know, the air is laden with bacteria. So if you have a separate place to milk them, I mean, ideally, you want a room. You can have like a little, you know, 6x8 room that you milk in. It doesn't have to be anything lavish. But you want all non-porous surface. We had a cement floor and just put a sealer on it. The walls, we got sheets of fiberglass that you just put up like wallpaper. And you want all your equipment to be stainless steel and glass. And the whole reason of all that is you don't want porous surfaces where bacteria can get in and stay. You don't want to spend all your time cleaning your milk area with a scrub brush. You know, our parlor we had the fiberglass on the wall, cement, everything's stainless. So you can get in there with a hose and clean everything down. Another thing too, if you're going to build yourself a room to milk in, make it so that you've got an incline going up to where the animal goes in. Whenever we first got our dairy, we lived up in farm country in Pennsylvania, and you know, it was quite a few years ago. I'm more like Tinia's age then, and we were the oddity because all of our neighbors were milking cows. We lived in a farm community. The school district didn't even have a town in it. We were just, it was all farmers. And so I was the oddity in the community. All the old farmers, they were like, hey, look at that little girl down there milking goats. Let's go see what's going on. So they'd all stop in and give me tips. Best tip I got is that whenever you're building your milk room, have the animals walk up an incline, because when they do, they're going to poop.
Or drop
And you're not gonna have manure in your parlor, because once you got manure in your parlor, you're back to the splash effect. As soon as that poop hits the ground, bacteria's in your air. So we milked 6 goats at a time and milked 35 head, and it was an oddity to have somebody poop in the parlor because they walked 12 feet up a ramp. So that was kind of a cool tip. Another thing is, it's really disappointing, is no nursing babies. You can't let your kids nurse. And you know, when we were first getting our license, we were lucky because in Pennsylvania they're very agriculture. And we did a bunch of testing of our milk to see what our bacteria levels were. Coliform is the biggie that they're looking for, and to be legal you have to have a count of 15 or less in one microscopic field. And you know, you get 1 or 2, you know, they start looking at you pretty hard. They want it to stay at 0, 1. You get up to 12, you know you're in trouble. Anyhow, I was of the attitude of, yeah, you know, I've seen dairy farmers. I know how dirty those cow people are. You know, I don't have to do that. That's crazy. I'm already clean. So to prove everybody how much better I was, I went and milked my goat where I always milk in the barn where they live. I milked her out, took a sample, put it in a sterilized sample bag, ran into the house, put it in ice water. As soon as I had it cold, I left it in there 20 minutes. As soon as it was cold, got in the car, drove up to the laboratory and said, there, have a look. And you know what my bacteria count was? Too numerous to count. That means I had hundreds. So, you know, that was quite a learning experience on how bacteria is. And so we built the parlor, start milking in there, and we're still trying to get our license, and our bacteria counts are still crazy. We're still getting 30s, 40s. Once you hit 50, you know, you're dead in the water. The way it works up there is if you flunk 3 bacteria counts in a row, and you get a bacteria count every 2 weeks. If you flunk 3 in a row, they yank your license. It's a $3,000 fine. Your name's in the paper, and you go before the local magistrate. It's a big deal.
So when you're talking about this bacteria count,
Yeah.
so the reason that the bacteria is a problem, you're drinking that milk, right?
Right.
So it's not harming you.
I'm healthy.
Right. So you're saying to sell to someone who isn't healthy, that would be a problem, but for you it's not.
Well, here's the other thing. Bacteria grows exponentially. You could have a bacteria count you could have a coliform count of 0 or 1 this morning. Tomorrow morning it's too numerous to count. That's keeping it at proper temperature and a regulation vat. You know, you need your bacteria as low as possible, because the longer it sits in that refrigerator, the more it grows. Because
and it doesn't spoil the milk? Is that what it was like?
Well, no.
Okay.
But
that's why I didn't know if it did.
Yeah. Well, it will eventually.
Yeah.
But you know, the bacteria, it's going to grow.
When you're saying bacteria, you're saying like more than just coliform.
Well,
like more than just E. coli.
It depends what your bacteria is.
Okay.
But coliform is the main one that they're looking for.
Okay.
Coliform bacteria comes from fecal matter.
Right.
So, like, even in the spring water, we had a really high coliform count in our spring water. Well, we had salamanders and frogs in there. So, you know, that's why we got the ultraviolet light system. So anyways, on the suck kits, the orifice stays open for 30 minutes after you take a squirt of milk out. That's the reason that you can't leave kids suck. In fact, we had our inspector come out because we just couldn't get our bacteria under control. So he was a really nice guy. He had a raw milk license for Guernseys. He had a little herd of about 30 Guernseys he was milking, and so he was real pro raw milk sales. And so I called him up and told him I can't get my bacteria figured out. So he came out and watched me milk one day, and we were all done. He scratched his head, and he's like, I just can't figure it out. I never seen anybody this clean. I don't know why you can't pass. He said, I'm really sorry, but I just can't help you. So he got in his car to leave, and my barn was up alongside the road, and whenever he pulled out, I seen him slam on his brakes and put it in reverse in the back in the driveway, and he said, hey, I saw a baby goat up there nursing on a doe. And I said, yeah? He said, well, does that happen a lot? I said, yeah, I let my meat kids suck because, that grows them fast. They're out the door quickly, make my money, I'm done. He said, oh, you can't do that. And, at that point, we were so desperate that even though it sounded crazy, we still went out and pulled all the kids. I was milking 35 head. I had 50 little meat kids out there. It was no small deal to pull those kids. But within a week, my bacteria was passing, and that was the end of the problem.
So even if you pull your kids all night and milk in the morning, you know what I'm saying?
No, you're gonna have bacteria in the udder. You got a bottle raised kids. That's the end of story.
Every time the kid sucks, it's open for 30 minutes. 30 minutes, more bacteria in. It sucks another hour from now, open 30 minutes.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
not only that, if you get a case of mastitis and you have kids on, they'll transmit it if the kids are nursing.
Yeah,
because, this kid, and so I learned that years ago. So that's a whole separate list.
So that's about bacteria. Let's talk about clean milk and what makes nice tasting milk. Feed. You got to think of your goat, cow. It's a manufacturing plant. What goes in this end comes out that end. It's very simple. So if your goat's out in the pasture and you got raw, I don't know about cows, you folks with cows, I don't know, but if there is raw onion in a 10-acre pasture, that baby can find it.
Yeah.
And you've got some really delightful oniony milk then. You got to walk your pasture, look for weeds. My goats will eat a pine tree. Boy, that's really dandy milk. So, when we were selling milk, what we did was we kept our goats in dry lot, fed them alfalfa and a nice 18% coarse feed. And we really regulated what they ate. But, we were selling all of our milk at that time. Another thing that you got to be cautious about is if you got an animal, I think every producer should have 15 minutes of their day that you do fence leaning. And what I mean by that is you lean on the fence and you stand there and you just watch your herd. Have a cup of coffee. Just watch everybody. See what they're doing. See if they're acting normal. Is your herd queen still being a bully? Are the kids still playing on the rocks? Watch them. Just stand there and watch. And that keeps your finger on the pulse of the health of your herd. If you see somebody acting not quite right, that milk gut's dumped. Because you don't know. Somebody not acting quite right this morning, tonight they could be in full-blown something. And in addition to TB and brucellosis, there's a lot of things that can pass through the milk from animals to humans. You've got E. coli, you've got salmonella, you've got listeria. So if there's any doubt at all that that animal isn't feeling right, don't put that milk in your share lots. And then once you take care of that sick animal, you got to look at your drugs. There's a lot of drugs that you just can't use in animals that you're doing milk. In wormers, there's very few that are okay. I don't even know off the top of my head what you can and cannot use anymore. My list is 15 years old, but
Sidectin is not approved for goats, but in dairy cows, it's no milk withdrawal in dairy cows. That's the only one I can tell you.
Is
How that works with goats is now been studied.
Well, my inspector went along with whatever was approved for dairy cattle we were allowed to use because they understood that goats weren't on the labels.
Does anybody know, have access to or has seen the testing for cattle, the testing of the milk after using dewormer? Like how many days, did they detect it in the milk?
They
How
say
long did they-
Sidectin is not in the milk in testing, but then you'll have people who are radical that don't want you to worm anything that say that's not true. But the story on Sidectin is it does not pass into the milk even the same day or the day after.
But they
So
have
there's-
found that ivermectin does?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, they have
about
found
it.
I know it has a withdrawal, but I wanna know who has the research that shows what they found with ivermectin.
Well, I've read it, I can't point you to it.
Okay.
But for ivermectin, they had a 90-day withdrawal.
Yeah, you don't use ivermectin.
So you just can't,
Can't use
ivermectin is completely off the list. So are
Yeah.
sulfa drugs. You can't use sulfa drugs in dairy animals either.
useless anyway.
But Naxal is a pretty good drug. And, you know, if you ever try to use Naxal on mastitis, you understand it doesn't get into the udder, and so it doesn't get into the milk. Naxal is approved. But you just really have to watch what drugs you're going to use. Look on the labeling. If it's approved for dairy cows, you can probably use it. So you want to be careful about drug residue because, again, I can't say it emphatically enough, is most people that are willing to spend $10 a jug of milk, they have a compelling reason that has them out there doing it. Another thing that I don't know if you know is that chickens, any state that allows raw milk sales, you're not even allowed to have chickens on the property.
Oh, interesting.
And by the time we got through all our bacteria testing, they said no chickens. I was like, all right, they're gone. I didn't even ask why. But I would assume it's because it's impossible to keep chickens out of your barn.
Yeah.
And they get in there and they scratch and they're throwing your bedding and, you know, they're airborning your bacteria. So I'm guessing that's why. So if you have chickens, at least confine them and put them away from the dairy barn.
Mine won't live. Yeah, she doesn't like chicken.
You know, if you take nothing else from what I say today, take this. Bacteria grows exponentially. You have to minimize the bacteria that you have in your product and then safeguard that by keeping it extremely cold. You know, the government regulations say you can keep milk at 40 degrees, and I say, ha, you cannot. You know, the 35 degrees, I keep my refrigerator at 35 degrees. And so, you know, you've got to keep it just barely above freezing. And you're just retarding the growth of the bacteria that way. So let's talk about the milking process a little bit. First off, you want to clip the udders, clip the inside of the hind legs, clip the belly up to the belly button. Clip all that area because the goat's hair is going to be full of bacteria from where they're laying around. Whenever you go to milk them, you wash each teat with its own rag, dry them with each towel, milk into stainless steel. This little bucket, this is a really handy little bucket, and look at your surface area. This thing is super cool. This bucket comes with
I love that.
a little lid. You know, you have to practice to get good enough to hit the little hole every time.
I'm milking to a strip cup 3 times.
Yeah. And then this one also comes with the lid, so while you're changing animals, you can cover up that little hole. So if you absolutely have to milk by hand, get you one of these buckets to stock your surface area. Milking by machine really is the way to go because it goes right from the teat into the hose, into the stainless steel. You don't have to take the lid off till you're out of the barn. So that's a really good way. Whenever you're done milking, you want to chill the milk as quick as possible. And the fastest way to chill milk is to float it in jugs in ice water. Don't just stick it in the freezer. There's nothing that comes close to how quickly it chills floating in a sink of ice water. And then you want to store it at the back of your refrigerator. Now when you want to clean up your equipment, you want to rinse it in lukewarm water. Then you want to wash it in lukewarm water. Then you want to rinse it in the hottest water you got, let it air dry. Do not rub it with a towel, because then you're putting some bacteria back.
Can you explain that, kind of go over why lukewarm and hot?
Well, because a hot water, you know, like when you're washing blood out of a shirt, you know, if you put hot water on it, it sets it. Same idea. If you put hot water onto the milk, you're going to set that stain. And I brought to show y'all, I acid washed this stuff so that you can see that it's clean. And then I brought a little dirty bucket. And the way that you can tell that you've got bacteria, you take a flashlight, and y'all can come up and look. But you take it and shine it, you can see there's a purpley glow to it.
Oh, yeah.
Can you see back there? It's a purpley glow. That tells you that I've got milk stone on there, so I got bacteria that's in my stainless steel. So, you can, and you use this stuff over here, this is acid wash.
And you can usually get that at Tractor Supply.
Yeah, that's where I got
They
it.
didn't used to carry it.
Tractor supplies now?
Whenever, if I don't
Mhm.
rinse my, or if I don't like wipe out my bucket, it kind of like almost turns rusted in some spots. If I don't dry it, if I like let it sit to dry.
That means you've got milk residue on it, and you get this acid wash. And what you do is you put it on there. They have two different ways you can do it. You can do it as a wash, or you can do it as a rinse. If you do the more concentrated, spray it on, use rubber gloves, and put that on, leave it soak for 10 minutes. Then you scrub it off. They have the little dairy brushes, and then you scrub it after it sits for 10 minutes, and then rinse it. And sometimes you have to wash them a couple of times if it's got build up on it till you get it off. But if you come up and look at like these, and this bucket is, 30 years old, and it still has its shine.
Dry
So-
too.
If y'all are shopping for stainless, if you don't have it yet, I have this style bucket with this lid, and then I've got this style here that it goes down in. This is by far better. When you're walking up to the house and carrying these, this will slush out the side and then run down the side. It's nasty. This one, the little insert, the milk slushes up there. It just goes right back down in. It doesn't come out.
Do you use your acid wash every time you wash? or-
No. You use that about, once every 2 weeks. Like every other Sunday do it. So then after you got all this all figured out, what you need to do next is educate your buyers. You people that are buying the shares, you want to educate them that the difference between a raw product and store milk, it's you got to explain to them that when they come get their milk, they bring a cooler with ice in it. Whenever they get it home, you can't do the breakfast where you set the jug on the table and everybody eats cereal and you leave it sit on the table for a half an hour and then put it back in. You get it out of the refrigerator, you use what you're going to use, then you put it back.
You shouldn't even do that for pasteurizing.
Well, people do though.
I know.
And then, you talk to them about what you keep your refrigerator set at. Like I said, I keep my refrigerator set at 35, and then I keep the milk in the back. And I get it out, I get what I'm using, then I put it right back in. And then you get a lot longer life. You can keep milk. You can keep raw milk for 2 weeks if you take proper care of it.
Can you freeze it?
I do, yes. And the rule is to freeze fast and thaw slow. So I have my freezer at 0. And I only put 1 gallon in the freezer at a time. And then it'll come out as liquid milk again whenever you thaw it. But if you put too much in and it takes too long for it to freeze, it'll come out chunky and it's really gross.
Well, and I found cow's milk doesn't freeze well, and I think because of the way that it's not naturally homogenized like
It
goat's milk, where
separates and
goat's
then-
milk does,
yeah.
but cow's milk, I won't use it. I don't like it after it's been frozen. But goat's milk seems to freeze well, but I don't it's gonna fail.
Well, I do all that negativity just to
Yeah.
make everybody realize that, the folks that are going to pay that kind of money, they have a compelling reason to do so. It's not like you and your healthy family drinking it. So you want to take as many of the precautions as you can to give them a nice, clean product so that nobody has a problem. Well, it is. It's just, I'm just trying to impress upon everyone that you just have to be really super clean. And, the chances of somebody having a problem are really pretty slim.
Well, and I think too, we forget that we're living in an age where this is fringe behavior to drink raw milk, and people are looking, even if they're looking for the product, they're not familiar with it. And if they end up with rotavirus and they happen to have had milk, what we see is this
Exactly,
this
yeah.
effect. It doesn't have to be true even
No.
that anything that happens, because we didn't grow up with raw milk and we aren't used to it, and even if we like the idea, there's some government where there's that lingering thought in the back of your head that could exist. So keeping in mind that people, if it was 100 years ago and you got sick and you happened to have drank milk from your cow, you wouldn't have your first
might not
thought
make
is
the
not, this
association.
raw milk has made me sick, because it's part of your everyday, where it's going to be suspect, and so you are going to constantly, you should have that in your mind.
Pasteurization?
Well, and in in the 60s is when West Virginia went to, you couldn't have raw milk dairies. I buy hay from a farm, and they had to convert from a raw milk dairy to a beef farm in the 60s. And prior to that, he said, and this is, it was Lemon's Brothers Dairy in Wayne County, and they said they never had anyone say they were sick in all the years his dad ran it up to that point, and then they shut it down. So, you know, so it's a new thing, but the government's done a good job, and so people do have
The fear is
there. So regardless of even the fear is there, and people can play on it. So whether something is ever in your milk or not, because the fear is there.
I think they have TB-free states, don't they? Like,
We are.
yeah, I thought West Virginia.
Yeah, we're TB and brucellosis free, but
That's still
One thing too, even though it's very rare, even though CAE isn't really connected to any issues with people definitively at all, and it's pretty common in goats, is CL, there are instances where it has been transmitted to people in Australia through milk. So even though it's rare, and the testing for that's not real definitive, but it is something to be aware of, you know, don't play around,
I don't
you know,
want to know. I don't want to know my
well,
phone
nobody
number.
should, but it is something that there are a few cases where that has transmitted to people, so.
but that's what I got. Anybody have any questions or thoughts?
Lots of them.
Well, I really appreciate it. I think it's real important that people, you know what to do, and I think what Marilyn's talking about is how I milk, and I mean being aware, how I milk for me and how I would milk for someone else has to be different. It's not about calling raw milk dangerous, it's just common sense as to what is on your place you are used to. And if it's new to someone else, they could get sick. And it
You
could have
can-
been
you
made,
can actually-
everyone else would have been fine, you know.
You can get that.
Exactly,
You can
that's
get it
what
that
I-
way through water. You
What's
can
the
actually
best
get
way
it,
to
you know.
filter your milk?
I have this is a stainless filter. These filters, I got some of my favorite supply places here for these little magazines. But I just get these little things, they're like $7 and there's 200 in a box. And then just put it in the bottom of a little filter. It sits it was made for this bucket.
I love these things. I can't find stuff that just fits in stuff like this
Yeah.
anymore. It's because it's 30 years old and they
Yeah.
just aren't that
No, I
sensible
know.
now.
You can buy those, and it fits right in a wide mouth mason jar.
Yeah.
'Cause
Well, I have that.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of
This
the-
one will too.
Yeah. I
But
have
it'll
a
tip
little
over.
bit.
This baby, you can
I like
rock
that,
and
because you can
roll.
actually milk straight into that.
I've
too,
looked
if you
for
want.
something like that to buy now and I can't find it.
Well,
I milk
I
it
think
too.
I think if you were milking by hand, I think you could milk in this bucket, put the lid on, walk it out,
Yeah.
have this sitting outside, filter it, put the lid on it.
I just milk into the strip cup, pour it into my thing with the ice bottle in it, and carry it to the house.
Do you just run it through a filter once, or do you?
Once, yeah.
Okay.
Now these are regular. These are inline for the inline milking systems they make for cattle.
Like the circle.
It's just like a saw. These are
You can also get different sizes.
I get them at PBS over in Ohio.
I really, having hand milked, would encourage you to use a machine if you're going to be a herd share.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't, I use it hand milking for us, but I just couldn't. I just, no matter what I do, I know stuff gets in that milk. And again, for your purposes, and to be a hardy farmer is fine, but I would not. And I can tell the difference when I hand milk and taste the milk sometimes as to when I was machine milking the cow.
Exactly.
And I know the difference. So if you can taste the difference, because you know, it's still good, but you're like, yeah, there is a difference. And so it's an investment, and I think it's a pain, and I hate the machine.
I don't either.
But still, if you're doing a herd share, work toward a machine.
And meanwhile, get
I
one
love
of these
my
little
machine.
ones.
I can't milk the
You end up with carpal tunnel if you don't.
Yes.
You'll wake up
Well,
like me
I
with your
can't-
arms
yeah.
paralyzed all night, and you're like, I can't keep, I'm not gonna be able to.